Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, we continue now from where we left off last time. We are in chapter 7. Chapter 7, the section that is explaining the gradual step-by-step training of the monk. This is actually the text of the shorter discourse on the elephant's footprint. And if you remember, just to review, some outside wanderer has praised the Buddha for 4 qualities which he considers to be the footprints of the elephant that the Buddha leaves. This is that the Buddha in debates is able to defeat and to transform people from the Kshatriya, that's the administrative class, Brahmins, householders, and the ascetics. And then the outside, the wanderer reports this to a Brahmin, and the Brahmin comes to the Buddha and reports what he has heard. And then when the Buddha hears this, he says that that is not the correct understanding of the elephant's footprint. And now the Buddha is going to explain the way the elephant's footprint should be, the way the simile of the elephant's footprint should be properly understood. And the Buddha says this because there are cases where an elephant trainer and an elephant hunter is trying to track down a big bull elephant in the forest. And when he goes into the forest, he'll see big elephant footprints. And if he comes to the conclusion that these big elephant footprints are definite indicators that there's a big bull elephant ahead, he's making an unjustified inference, because there are other types of elephants that leave the big footprints. It could even be a small elephant, the big foot. And so he can only come to a perfect conclusion that these are the tracks of a big bull elephant when he's traced the tracks and taken them to a place in the forest where he can look and see there is the big bull elephant at the end of the tracks. Okay, so now the Buddha is going to apply that simile to the case of the training within its own system, within its own Dharma. And so he does this by taking the training of the Buddhist monk. Okay, so the sections that we've already covered deal with the training on moral discipline, or sila. And then we come to the training in contentment, which in a way is a part of the training in moral discipline. And then we covered last time the training in sense restraint. That's paragraph 15. And so now we come to the next section in the sutta. This is section 16. And as I explained in the last class, we can see these steps in training as designed to promote an increasing depth and purity of interior experience. And so the training begins at the coarsest level with the training in one's moral discipline. These are the trainings concerned with conduct, observing the precepts, And it might seem that this stage of training is concerned only with one's bodily and verbal actions. But actually, one's bodily and verbal actions originate from the mind. They are expressions of one's mental state. And so when one undertakes the precepts, then one is, in a subtle way, by exercising control over one's bodily and verbal actions, in a subtle way, one is changing the mind, transforming the mind, shifting the mind onto a new track, a different track. So without the guidance of the precepts and the training rules, the mind tends to flow sort of naturally, spontaneously, through deep-seated habit. It moves in the current of unwholesome mental motivations, unwholesome mental qualities. But when one undertakes the training in the precepts, the moral training, then one is deliberately regulating one's conduct in the light of, or under the guidance of, wholesome, purifying mental qualities. So we can say that basically all of the precepts are guided by either the restraint of greed, craving, the restraint of hatred or aversion. So there are a few of the training rules that are laid down in this particular passage that we examine. Not so much because they are of explicit moral significance, but because they were conformed to the standards, the proper standards of conduct that were expected in the Buddha's time of a renunciant, a world renouncer. For example, to abstain from injuring seeds and plants. From the Buddhist standpoint, seeds and plants don't have consciousness. They're not conscious living beings. And so if a Buddhist is a farmer who's cultivating crops, naturally he has to cut down the plants that are growing in order to get food. So this is not a case of transgressing the precept against the destruction of life or taking life. It's not a violation of the precept against killing. But in the Buddha's time, it was sort of an understood principle of conduct amongst renunciants that they should not cut down plants or intentionally damage growing plants. And so under pressure from the environment, from the culture of the period, the Buddha had to accept this into his own code of training for the monastics. It's not obligatory on lay people. Okay, but just about all of the other principles laid down here have some kind of ethical significance. Okay, so then from this training in moral discipline, regulating bodily and verbal conduct, then with contentment, again we have a principle which is, or a guideline, which is encouraging the development of a pure, wholesome mental attitude. So by taking the training in contentment, one becomes content with the simple, bare requisites of existence. One doesn't have a need for many clothes. As a monastic, a monk will have just 3 robes. Because of the cold climate, they also need other clothes to keep us warm. But in India during the Buddhist time, the monks would be able to get by with just 3 robes and then a bathing cloth for when they wash one of the robes. Okay, and then this discipline in sense restraint. Again, here the training is taking a deeper step inside. It's becoming more interiorized. Because now, through the training in sense restraint, one is not allowing the senses to dwell on those objects which increase craving and aversion. Okay, and we should notice that each of these trainings brings along its own type of inner happiness or bliss. At the end of paragraph 14, when the Buddha is speaking after he finishes the training in moral discipline, he says, possessing this aggregate or set of noble moral discipline, he, the disciple, experiences within himself the bliss of blamelessness. And then after describing the training in sense restraint, he says that the disciple experiences within himself an unsullied bliss. This means a bliss which is unadulterated with any kind of arising of greed and aversion. Okay, but now the training has to go deeper in the next stage. The next stage is called the training in clear comprehension. Here we have a very important word in Pali. Okay, this word sampajanya is based on the verb jahanati, which means to know. And then it has these prefixes, sam, which gives a sense of fullness, and pa, which, it's hard to know exactly the sense of this. Sometimes it has a sense of greater precision. And so, from sam plus pa plus janati, we get the verb sampajanati, which gives the noun sampajanya, which I'll translate as clear comprehension. And what this means basically is a kind of knowledge or understanding that accompanies all of one's actions. So instead of acting impulsively, instead of acting without clear awareness, instead of acting just under the driven by one's impulses, one now does everything accompanied by awareness and guided by awareness. And so one understands what one is doing and why one is doing it. Usually in the suttas, sampajanya is closely associated with the quality of mindfulness. So we have this expression, sati sampajanya. Sati is mindfulness. Okay, so these two qualities of sati and sampajanya are very, very closely associated. And when the text here speaks about acting with clear comprehension, we have to understand that mindfulness is also involved. One is acting with mindfulness and with clear comprehension. And so the question comes up, what exactly is the difference between mindfulness and clear comprehension? And I haven't seen this convincingly explained in the text, so I have to give my own understanding of the difference, the way I would explain the difference. I would understand it in that mindfulness is the awareness of what one is doing. And so when one acts, while acting, one is one is aware of what one is doing. One has one's attention focused on one's body, established in one's body, and so one acts with an awareness of what one is doing. And that awareness is mindfulness. Now in Sampajanya, the element of knowing is more prominent. And so Sampajanya is not simply being aware in a general sense of what one is doing, but it is being clearly and distinctly knowing what one is doing and knowing why one is acting. The commentators who commented on or explained the sutras analyze clear comprehension into four aspects. So they explain that there are four types of clear comprehension. The first is clearly comprehending let me put it this way. The first is clearly comprehending the purpose of one's action. And so before one acts, one considers whether the action one is intending to undertake is really purposeful or not, whether it's beneficial to oneself, beneficial to others. Okay, the second aspect of clear comprehension is clearly comprehending whether the action that one is going to undertake is an effective way to achieve one's aim. See, the first type of clear comprehension is concerned with the aim itself, the purpose. Is one's purpose in undertaking this action going to be really beneficial to oneself, beneficial to others? The second type of clear comprehension is concerned with whether the action is going to be the effective way to achieve one's purpose. So this brings a kind of pragmatic aspect into clear comprehension. The third aspect of clear comprehension in Pali, that means it's Gochara Sampajanya, which means clear comprehension of the area or range. That's the literal meaning. But the way the commentators explain it, it means keeping one's mind on the object of meditation when one is acting. So this explanation of clear comprehension is directed to somebody who is engaged in the practice of meditation. And so usually one thinks that one practices meditation just when sitting in a particular posture, in a meditation hall or in a shrine room. Then when one gets up, one just gives up one's meditation. But actually when one is training in intensive meditation, then one always has to keep the object of meditation before the mind, even when one is involved in activities. If one finds it difficult to keep a particular object of meditation present before the mind when engaged in activities, then one leaves that fixed meditation object aside and one just develops mindfulness and clear comprehension of the activity itself in which one is engaged. Okay, then the fourth aspect of clear comprehension is called clear comprehension as non-delusion. And this means clearly comprehending the experience one is undergoing in terms that lead to the development of insight or wisdom. So this fourth type of clear comprehension is actually the type of investigation, analysis that one undergoes when one is practicing intensive meditation. It's the type of analysis and investigation one undertakes in order to arouse insight knowledge, to be able to understand one's experience in a way that leads to the arising of insight or wisdom. But in the passage that we're concerned with here, I would say that this fourth aspect of clear comprehension is not yet relevant, since here we have a monk who's still in a relatively early stage of his training. Okay, so what I would assume is that the first two types of clear comprehension are what are most relevant in this passage. That is, when acting, when one is going to undertake an action, one first investigates whether this action is really beneficial or not. One investigates what is the purpose of my action. Is it going to be something fulfilling, beneficial, something that will promote my development in the Dharma? Or is it just some way of squandering time, just indulging my curiosity, just fruitless and useless activity? Okay, and the second is determining whether this action is the most effective way to achieve one's purpose. Okay, so now the Buddha explains how this mindfulness and clear comprehension are to be sustained in all activities. And so he says here now the disciple is one who acts with clear comprehension when going forward and returning. So when going out, say, of his dwelling, making a trip someplace, one first determines whether this trip outside is going to be beneficial or not. Then when coming back, one determines whether returning is going to be beneficial. Okay, when one acts with clear comprehension, when looking ahead and looking away or looking to the side. Okay, this again becomes a way of mastering the sense restraints that one has developed earlier. So ideally, the Buddha says that when the monastic person is in training, when walking ahead, he keeps the eyes just focused, maybe about 3 yards ahead of him, not looking around, curiosity, what's going on here, what's going on there, but one should be self-possessed. That is the ideal standard, is to be in possession of oneself. And when one is in possession of oneself, then one doesn't allow the eyes to look around here and there and just idle curiosity. When hearing interesting sounds, one doesn't turn here and there, again out of curiosity. But one has this control over the senses, so that one is keeping the eyes just focused a short distance ahead, not allowing the senses to roam and wander. But when there's a reason to look aside, then one does so with clear comprehension. One might realize that something important has come within the range of my vision. I should look to the side or look up. Nowadays, if one is walking through the town, crossing streets, of course, one has to look up and look to the side. If you're driving a car, you have to be very vigilant looking around. Okay, but ideally one does this always with a clear comprehension of first the reason for looking up, or looking to the side, and understanding whether this is going to be suitable or not for achieving one's purposes. Okay, then one acts with clear comprehension when flexing and extending the limbs. Flexing here means bending in, extending means stretching the limbs out. And so even when moving the arms, when moving the leg, when one is sitting, one does this with clear comprehension, understanding what one is doing. Normally one doesn't think of bending the arms out or in as being beneficial or not beneficial, but I think the intention here is that one does this with an understanding and awareness of what one is doing. And there's one example that was given in the commentaries to illustrate how this was practiced by some of the elders of ancient times. They said that there was one elder monk who was giving some instructions to his pupils, and while he was speaking, he bent his arm out, brought it in, then immediately afterwards he extended the arm out in the same way, and then brought it in again exactly in the same way. Then his pupils asked him, they said, "Bhante, why did you just extend your arm out, bring it in, and then immediately afterwards, exactly in the same way, you extended it out and bent it in?" And then the elder monk explained that for the last 10 years, I've done every action with clear comprehension of Sampajanya. But just as one moment as I was speaking to you, I bent my arm out and brought it in without clear comprehension. But immediately after I did that, I realized that I had let my clear comprehension slip. And so I put my arm out the second time and brought it in. But this time doing it with clear comprehension. Maybe that's a little exaggerated. It illustrates what is intended. Okay, one who acts with clear comprehension when wearing the robes and carrying the outer robe in bowl. Okay, you can understand this even when dressing, putting on one's clothes, undressing, then one acts with clear comprehension. Okay, then when eating, drinking, chewing food, tasting food, again one acts with clear comprehension. One is knowing what one is doing, why one is doing it. And so one is aware with mindfulness, and through sampajanya, one has the clear comprehension of the purpose of one's action, the reason for it, and one keeps the action constantly in mind as one does it. Okay, then, even when going to the toilet, when defecating and urinating, one acts with clear comprehension. Again, one has the mindfulness set up, one is aware of what one is doing, and one is knowing what one is doing through clear comprehension. Is that thought? Maybe it should be open. then the Buddha, in the last phrase here, in the next phrase, will draw all the types of postures together and to bring them under the governance of clear comprehension. So when he mentions here the four main postures, when walking, when standing still, when sitting down, and when lying down about to fall asleep, one has clear comprehension set up. But if one keeps that clear comprehension too active and too alert when one is lying down to fall asleep, generally it will prevent one from falling asleep. So in order to fall asleep, one has to loosen up this mindfulness and clear comprehension. Okay, then when one wakes up, as soon as one wakes up, immediately the clear comprehension comes, the mindfulness and clear comprehension. One knows now that one is awake, and that all of the actions after waking are done with clear comprehension. Then when speaking, one speaks with clear comprehension. And when one keeps silent with clear comprehension. And when one wants to speak, then again one brings up this clear comprehension. One considers whether what one is going to say is meaningful, beneficial, whether it's true or false, whether there's a real reason for speaking, or whether it would not be better to keep silent. Okay, so this is the way mindfulness and clear comprehension is exercised in all of these activities. And if one is practicing that third aspect of clear comprehension that I mentioned, the clear comprehension of the meditation object, then when engaged in most of these activities, one tries to keep the meditation object in mind. For example, if one is doing mindfulness of breathing, and even when walking, one tries to be mindful of the breathing. Even when eating, tasting food, one still tries to keep the mind on the breath. This is when one is doing intensive meditation. But in many systems of meditation, it's thought that in practicing clear comprehension, instead of trying to keep the mind focused on the primary object, one drops the primary object and lets the mind settle upon the body, and then one becomes mindful and clearly understands the particular action in which one is engaged. So to give an example, when one is eating, instead of trying to be mindful of the breath, one lets the breath go, and one becomes mindful, and one clearly understands each phase in the act of eating. So the way this clear comprehension would be taught in some systems of meditation. Normally, when we eat food, we just go about eating, we don't really pay attention to what we're doing. But when one directs clear comprehension to the act of eating, then one will distinguish each phase of the act of eating. For example, you take the spoon, putting the spoon on the plate. We understand putting the spoon down, then putting the food into the spoon, then lifting the spoon up to the mouth, then putting the food into the mouth. Then when one is chewing the food, one is aware of chewing when one is swallowing, one is aware of swallowing. Then when one goes to the next mouthful, one is aware of putting the spoon down onto the plate. Maybe one wants to take a different dish, one is aware of taking a different dish, putting that food into the spoon, lifting the spoon up to the mouth, tilting the spoon, emptying the food into the mouth, again, chewing. When one is tasting the food, one is aware of tasting. When one is swallowing the food, one is aware of swallowing. Okay, so this act that normally just takes place automatically seems to be just one continuous block that's going on, one solid action. But through clear comprehension, one becomes aware of how that seemingly uniform act of eating is actually constituted of separate phases, separate stages, taking the food, lifting, putting it to the mouth, chewing, tasting, swallowing. Okay, how this kind of practice leads to the arising of insight or wisdom. Each of these phases one sees is distinct. So when taking the food is taking place, putting the food into the spoon is taking place, that's one action. Then when one is lifting the spoon, then the action of putting the food into the spoon is stopped, it ceases, vanished. Lifting the food, this is a new action. When the spoon comes to the mouth, that action of lifting the spoon is finished, gone, ceased. Putting the food into the mouth, a new action. Okay, once the food is in the mouth, then that action ceases. And now the next action takes place, chewing the food. And as one chews, one also tastes the food. But when one pays close enough attention, one can distinguish the awareness of chewing and the awareness of tasting. So each of these actions one sees as distinct. Then when one finishes chewing the food, then one swallows it. So then the act of chewing ceases and the act of swallowing takes place. Now this might seem something very trivial, almost obvious, but when one is doing this with intense mindfulness, what is becoming evident and clear is the subtle fact of impermanence. Not just impermanence when a cup breaks or when a loved person dies, but this is impermanence of every action. That every action has a beginning, has an arising, some duration while it's going on, then an end when it stops. And when it stops, that action is finished and done with. So the characteristic of cessation is becoming manifest. And when one does this over a long period of time, continuously, even in one of these sub-actions, one could see many distinct phases. For example, when one is lifting the spoon, one could see the hand many times intentionally bringing the hand up to the mouth. And so one sees many intentions arising and passing, many intentions of lifting the spoon to the mouth. And along with each of these intentions is just a very brief action of lifting the hand closer and closer to the mouth. And so this one action of lifting the spoon to the mouth gets broken up and subdivided into many subordinate actions of lifting. Each of those subordinate actions arises and passes away. And when it passes away, it's gone, it ceases, finished. And so in this way, through this intensive attention to one's actions, the characteristic of impermanence is becoming evident or manifest. Okay, maybe at this point I'll ask whether there's any questions on this practice of mindfulness and clear comprehension.
One question. You used the word when you were talking about the four levels of your comprehension. I think it was the fourth level when you mentioned, you used the word analysis. And I've been involved in a meditation group. Generally, unless I've missed the message.
And generally,
when I'm in a sitting group, a Vipassana sitting group, and as I've confused the message, I've been told to not analyze. But now I'm reducing this term in connection with the highest level of clear comprehension. So that sort of confused me, and I wonder if you could just comment.
Okay, I think I could understand the point of the question. Okay, just to put the question in through this mic here. The question is that I used the word analysis when I spoke about this practice of clear comprehension of reality, and yet you've been told through your meditation group that one shouldn't analyze. Like, I don't think that there's an actual contradiction here, because I think it's better to leave that door in the back open. Many people seem to be coming. Okay. During this stage when it's developing an initial or foundational awareness of one's meditation object, then one should not analyze, because when one is analyzing, then one is using conceptual thought, which will just bring you into, the labyrinths of thought, discursive thinking, and away from the clear awareness of the object that's to be present before you. Could be breath, could be rising and falling of the abdomen, whatever. Okay, so in order to build up one's mindfulness and especially one's concentration, one has to be simply and clearly aware of the object without allowing oneself to get swept away by thinking about it, or thinking about what's going on. Okay, but once an object the mind becomes consistently sustained on an object, so that one has a high degree of samadhi, or focusing or concentration on the object, then in order to change or to redirect that samadhi to development of insight, then one analyzes one's experience somewhat in the way I explained, not as a way of just thinking about it, but a way of observing how a particular action can be dissected into a number of stages, and then one examines these stages and sees how each phase or each stage arises, subsists for a brief period, then stops, vanishes. Okay, so this is what I mean by analysis. So dissecting the experience into its constituent phases. Okay, then, here I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I'll just completely answer to your question. When one is examining the experience in order to develop a deep level of insight, then one focuses on different aspects of this experience in terms, using, for example, the scheme like the 5 aggregates. But at this stage, one is not simply thinking, I read about the 5 aggregates, They say that there's form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. But now one is using this scheme of the five aggregates as a kind of template for understanding the nature of one's experience. And so now one breaks this seemingly monolithic, solid experience down into its different constituents. Within this experience, there is bodily form. Within this experience, I can see feelings arising and passing, pleasant, painful, neutral feelings. I can see the perception, that's the perception of the meditation object. I can see the mental formations, the intentions, say the intention of keeping the mind on the object, or the intention of investigating and examining the object. And then I can see that there's some background awareness of all this, and that is the consciousness aggregate. And so now one has analyzed the experience into the five aggregates. But this is not just a purely conceptual, intellectual exercise, but now this is experiential. It's very helpful. Any further questions? And please ask a question. Don't give another lecture.
I read in some of the commentaries, probably by Usilananda or Somatera, Sati and Sampajana, you cannot separate. They're like according to the two different sides.
The two sides of forms.
Right. So Sati alone cannot function. Sampajana cannot function. They're always together. And is it functioning like that all the time?
Let's say in the suttas they're always put together. I'm not sure that one could say as an absolute rule that they can function separately. There might be cases where there's sati, mindfulness without clear comprehension. But the way they're explained in the suttas, they're often put together. And so it seems that when one is undertaking the meditative training, then one has to have mindfulness, and then based on the mindfulness one has to go further and have clear comprehension. But there are two different mental qualities which have their different characteristics. And it might be under certain conditions that one could have one without the other. Okay, then we will go on to the next part of the sutta. Okay, even though the kind of preliminary meditative training has been going on all the time while these earlier sections have been explained, with paragraph 17, now we come to the first section, which deals with the intensive development of the meditation practice. In the earlier stages, we could assume that this monk in training is practicing some form of meditation, but he has to integrate that practice with these preliminary phases of training. But now we come to the section where the advice is given on how to develop the intensive meditation aimed at the attainment of the jhanas, the deep states of meditative absorption. And so the first piece of advice that the Buddha gives is to go to a place which is suitable for the intensive meditation practice. And the Buddha mentions the places that would have been available to the wandering homeless monks of that period. They can go to, first, actually in the sentence itself, the Buddha incorporates all of the other factors that he's mentioned in order to emphasize the fact that these early stages of training provide the foundation or basis for the training aimed at the jhanas. So one has this aggregate of noble moral discipline, one has this noble restraint of the sense faculties, and one has this noble mindfulness and clear comprehension. And possessing these as one's equipment, as one's supporting conditions, then one resorts to a secluded resting place or dwelling place. And so the Buddha mentions the ideal place is the forest, the root of a tree, a mountain, the side of a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, the child ground where bodies would be cremated, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. But in the Satipatthana Sutta and elsewhere, he also mentions simply going to an empty room, a quiet room. Okay, then on returning from his alms round, after his meal, he sits down, folds his legs crosswise, sets his body erect, and establishes mindfulness before him. Okay, this is describing the proper posture. And this is for the sitting meditation. And now the Buddha is going to explain very concisely the preliminary stage of meditation, which is concerned with the overcoming, the elimination of the 5 hindrances. Okay, in this paragraph itself, he doesn't mention the 5 hindrances, only in the next paragraph. But we should know these 5 hindrances and become acquainted with them, because these are the main barriers to successful meditation practice. And so the 5 hindrances. Okay, the usual way of naming the 5 hindrances are sensual desire, ill will, dullness and drowsiness, restlessness and remorse, and doubt. But in this passage, the text uses a different word. Rather than using sensual desire, it uses longing for the world. The word here is, the Pali word is avijja, which actually has the same meaning as sensual desire. Okay, so the Buddha says, abandoning longing for the world, he dwells with a mind free from longing. And here the Buddha is not explaining the methods to overcome these 5 hindrances, but he's just treating the 5 hindrances in a very general way. And so I'm not going to deal in detail with the overcoming of the 5 hindrances now, because we will come to that in the next chapter, where we meet the 5 hindrances again, and then at that point we can discuss the specific methods that are used to overcome the 5 hindrances. But the important point here is that in order for the mind to be able to enter into the deep samadhi or jhana, one has to overcome these 5 hindrances. These are the barriers at the gate of, we say, the palace of samadhi. These are the guards at the gate that prevent one from entering. So to enter the palace, one has to find some way to eradicate these guards at the gate. These are what keep the mind tied down to the sensual world, the world of desire, conflict, confusion. And so we have to get past them. Okay, so this first barrier is sensual desire, which is desire for the enjoyment of the 5 sense objects. Okay, so he purifies his mind from longing for sensual desire, then abandoning ill will and hatred. He dwells with a mind free from ill will, a mind compassionate for all living beings. Then abandoning dullness and drowsiness. Okay, dullness and drowsiness are actually 2 qualities which are closely associated. What's called dullness can maybe also be thought of as kind of rigidity of mind, a cloudiness of the mind, a stiffness of the mind. When the mind becomes stiff and unwieldy, or heavy, that is dullness. And then often, what happens is that dullness arises first, and then when the mind enters into this dull state, this dull or rigid or heavy state, then one starts to become sleepy, and that is drowsiness. And this is not the ordinary sleepiness when one has to get one's sleep at night, but this is a kind of drowsiness that can come upon one, even if one has had sufficient sleep at night. During the middle of the day, one is practicing meditation, and just one hits this kind of barrier where the mind first becomes dull or heavy, or stiff and rigid, and then, because one can't get past that, drowsiness descends and one feels the need to sleep. Okay, but abandoning this dullness and drowsiness, then one dwells free from dullness and drowsiness, percipient of light. When one emerges from that dullness and drowsiness, then the mind becomes very bright, luminous, radiant, and the mindfulness and clear comprehension becomes very strong and sharp. Okay, the opposite of dullness and drowsiness is restlessness and remorse. Dullness and drowsiness are 2 qualities which we could say they are like a stone placed in water that pushes the mind down. We say it's like the mind is like an object attached to the stone. You put the stone in the water, and the stone pulls the object down. Maybe it's like a feather. You attach a feather to a stone, put the stone on the water, and the stone will pull the feather down. That's like dullness and drowsiness, that heavy inertia, because they call it inertia of the mind. But restlessness and remorse, these are 2 qualities which agitate the mind. We say that they are like putting the feather on the surface of the water at a time when a strong wind is blowing, disturbing the surface of the weather and churning it up into waves and ripples. Okay, so restlessness is like the current of agitated thoughts arising just one after another, sometimes very rapidly, without any kind of guiding purpose to those thoughts, without any supervision, but the thoughts are just rising up and succeeding one after another. And then what's called remorse, this is a kind of regret that takes place for wrong actions that might have been committed in the past, things that one shouldn't have done that one has done, things that one should have done that one has neglected to do. Sometimes when one is practicing, these memories of past misdeeds will arise and cause this remorse, regrets, feelings of guilt. And for Buddhism, this is not something which should be accepted, but it's an obstruction to the mind that one has to overcome. Okay, so restlessness and remorse, they're separate qualities, but they work together to disturb or agitate the mind. And then the fifth hindrance is also a disturbing or agitating quality, but it's so prominent that it is put in a class by itself. And this is doubt. What's meant by doubt here is not the normal rational doubt that one might have when a certain aspect of the Dhamma seems questionable, and then one wants to investigate in order to have it cleared up. That kind of doubt the Buddha encourages. But this is a kind of doubt which is self-defeating and self-destructive. It's the doubt which causes you to become discouraged about the practice, and its tendency is to lead you to give up the practice. It's the doubt which sort of whispers in your ear that this practice is futile, useless, that this doesn't have any beneficial purpose, that you're wasting your time, or it's doubt about one's own ability to succeed, the doubt I don't have the qualities to succeed, the merits to succeed in this practice. You can be doubt about the Buddha, maybe he wasn't truly enlightened, maybe he was just self-deceived, doubt about the teaching, doubt about whether I'm undertaking the practice correctly or not. Okay, so these are the doubts which discourage one from continuing with the practice. The Buddha elsewhere, he compares this to a desert. Actually, we'll come to the similes for the five hindrances just in a moment. Okay, so abandoning doubt, now he dwells, having gone beyond doubt, unperplexed about wholesome states. That means now, by clearing up one's doubts, one now understands that this practice is wholesome and beneficial, and that by continuing with this practice, I'm eliminating unwholesome qualities and developing wholesome states, wholesome qualities. So in this way, one purifies one's mind from doubt. Okay, now I want to go to another sutta, which I included in this anthology, which is very similar to this passage, except that it includes similes for the five hindrances. This is on page 250 of our book. And it's paragraph 14. In this sutta, the Buddha explains the same basic process of training, but he includes similes which help to make the nature of the different stages of practice clearer to our understanding. So to illustrate the 5 hindrances, the Buddha uses a simile for each hindrance. So the hindrance of sensual desire or longing for the world, this is like a man who takes a loan in order to start a business. Well, okay, this is actually showing the freedom from the 5 hindrances. Okay, so the man takes a loan and undertakes business, and his business succeeds, and so he's able to repay the old loan, and then he has enough left over to start a business and enough left over to take a wife. Okay, then when he considers this, then he becomes glad and full of joy. Okay, so in this simile, the hindrance of sensual desire is compared to a loan. When one takes a loan, then when one takes a loan, one is in bondage to one's creditor. One always has to heed the commands of one's creditor, one is always afraid of the creditor, and one always has that burden of debt on one's mind. And so the Buddha is comparing this to sensual desire. When the mind is gripped by sensual desire, then one always finds oneself driven, compelled to pursue the object of one's desire. But when one eliminates the sensual desire, then it's like being free of debt. Okay, then the next simile illustrates ill will, the hindrance of ill will. This is like a man who is afflicted, suffering, and gravely ill. So anger or ill will is like an affliction of the body, being in a state of grave illness, of sickness. Okay, but later he recovers from this affliction. He's able to eat normally. He gains his bodily strength, and then when one recovers from the illness, then one becomes full of joy. So this is like overcoming ill will. Okay, the next simile illustrates this dullness and drowsiness of the mind. This is like a man who is in prison, because when dullness and drowsiness descend on the mind, it's like being trapped, locked into a prison. One cannot go out and move about wherever one wants, but one is just confined to this cage of the prison. Okay, but when one is released from the prison, then one can move about wherever one wants, one is safe and secure, and then when one reflects on this, one becomes full of joy. So this is like being free from dullness and drowsiness. Okay, then the fourth simile is a simile of being, this is a simile that illustrates restlessness and remorse. And this is like being in a state of slavery. A person who is a slave is driven to go by his master. He's told, you have to go here, you have to go there. So he has to move about at the beck and call of his master. The master says, you have to do this work, and he has to do that work, this work. You have to go on this message, then he has to go on this message. And so his life is completely driven by others, under the command of others. He has no independence. So that is like the state of restlessness and remorse. One's mind is always being driven around by one's restless thoughts, and one doesn't have this mastery over one's own mind. Okay, so the abandoning or overcoming of restlessness and remorse, that is like being released from slavery. When one is released from slavery, then one becomes independent. One is a free person, able to go wherever one wants, to stay wherever one wants. And so when one gains this freedom, again one becomes full of joy. Okay, the hindrance of doubt, this the Buddha compares to a desert. And so we have a man who's traveling on a desert, across a desert. He has wealth and property with him. And so while he's crossing the desert, first he's always unsure where he's going. And he's also insecure. He never knows. We don't have experience here in America crossing a desert in a caravan. But in the Buddha's time, when one had to cross a desert, it was always a very dangerous undertaking. There would often be brigands, bands of robbers who were waiting for caravans to cross the desert, and they would attack the caravan, kill the people, take their belongings, take their wealth and merchandise. Okay, so as one is crossing the desert, one is always insecure, one doesn't know whether one is taking the right direction, one never knows when one is going to be attacked. But when one gets across and reaches one's destination, then one is happy and full of joy. And so this is like when one is filled with doubt, then one doesn't know which direction one is going, what is the correct direction, whether one is heading towards one's ideal of enlightenment. And so, when the mind is plagued by doubt, that is like crossing the desert. But when one is free from doubt, even though one doesn't have perfect certainty, but through one's practice, one just puts the doubts aside, continues to practice, one begins to experience benefits from the practice, and then this leads to a growing confidence in the teaching. That is like crossing the desert. Okay, so then the Buddha says, when these 5 hindrances have been abandoned in himself, then he sees that as freedom from debt, recovering from illness, being released from prison, being freed from slavery, and it's like crossing the desert and reaching a safe land. Okay, maybe at this point then I'll ask whether there's any questions. Okay, no questions, then we can go back to the original sutta, back to page 247. And now we come to the jhanas themselves. Okay, the word jhana, it comes from the root ja, which means to examine closely. Sometimes it means to think deeply. But in the Indian spiritual culture of the Buddha's period, this word jhana came to take on a special meaning. It came to designate a state of deep concentration in which the mind is focused one-pointedly upon its object. This means that the attention to the object is sustained or consistent. And the attention to the object becomes so strongly sustained, so consistent, that the mind rises up above the level of our ordinary consciousness and enters into a kind of deep absorption in the object. which becomes a whole new level of consciousness, a whole new level of being. And the Buddha had investigated the state of jhana very carefully, and through his experience he distinguished 4 levels of absorption, 4 levels of deep meditation. And so he broke the concept of jhana or deep meditation up into 4 stages, 4 levels, which he calls the 4 jhanas. And not only did the Buddha distinguish between 4 jhanas, but again, through his meditative investigation, he singled out certain factors or qualities of mind that are distinctive in each of these jhanas. And these are the factors that enter into the description that we find here in the sutta. Okay, so taking the passage, we can analyze and investigate this passage. First, the Buddha mentions the states that have to be eliminated to enter the jhana. He says, having thus abandoned these 5 hindrances, and these 5 hindrances are called defilements of the mind, corruptions of the mind, because they obscure the intrinsic brightness or luminosity of the mind. As the mind becomes more concentrated, then the mind also becomes more radiant, brighter, which is experienced almost as a kind of visible brightness, except that it's not a brightness that one sees with the eyes, but a brightness that swells up, wells up from the depths of the mind itself. But on account of the 5 hindrances, this brightness is obscured, darkened, corrupted. And so the 5 hindrances are called corruptions of the mind or defilements of the mind. And then the 5 hindrances also have another function, that is, they weaken wisdom. So as long as the mind is overrun by the 5 hindrances, then the arising of wisdom is not possible. Wisdom, or panya, the deep penetrative wisdom, depends upon the mind being clear, focused, concentrated, and the mind cannot become clear, focused, and concentrated as long as it's overrun by the 5 hindrances. Okay, so having abandoned these 5 hindrances, then secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. Okay, so in order to gain the jhana, one has to withdraw from the objects of sensual enjoyment. And then one secludes the mind from unwholesome states. That is just another way of saying that one overcomes the 5 hindrances and also all other unwholesome states that might be related to the 5 hindrances. Okay, so those are the qualities that have to be eliminated to gain the first jhana. Okay, then when one enters the first jhana, one enters and dwells in the first jhana, it is accompanied by, here I want to use the Pali words. It's difficult to find the exact translation. It's accompanied by vitaka and vichara, with rapture and happiness born of seclusion, vivekajam piti sukham. Okay, it tends to find exact translation to some of these words is very difficult. Okay, so the first two qualities we have mentioned here, I translated as thought and examination. I will state them when we come to them, so we don't have to worry if we can't see so well. Okay, the first, I didn't put the Pali for that, the last one. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, the first is vitakka. It's translated as thought, but here we should not understand in the jhana that vitakka is actually thinking as we ordinarily know it. It's explained in the commentaries that what is meant by vitakka is, in relation to the jhana, it's the factor of mental application. That is, this is the factor by which one applies the mind to the object. And so, when one starts to practice for the attainment of jhana, one initially has vitakka and vichara as the main instruments to use. Okay, vitakka is the factor by which one is applying the mind to the object. For example, if one is being mindful of breathing, being aware of the breath as it comes in and out by the nostrils, vitakka is the factor that takes the mind and applies the mind to the breath. So vitakka puts the mind, we say that it fixes the mind on the area around the nostrils, and vitakka is what continually applies the mind to the in and out breathing. The second factor, vichara, is what I translate as examination. But this is not an analytical examination. It's not thinking conceptually about the object, but it's simply the quality which simply sustains the mind on the object. It's the factor which ensures that the mind remains on the object and doesn't drift away. Sometimes it's said that vichara is the quality which anchors the mind on the object. The commentaries give some illustrations of the relationship between vitakka and vichara. They say that vitakka is like hitting a chime. The sound that arises when it first hits the chime, and vichara is like the sound of the chime that continues after one has struck it. I think that simply is not so good because it suggests that there's some temporal gap between vitakka and vichara, whereas they occur simultaneously. So a better illustration is given again in the commentary. It's like holding a dish with one hand and wiping it with the other hand. So vitakka is like the hand with which you take up the dish and hold it. Vichara is like the hand that loves the dish as you're washing it. Another illustration is using I forgot what it's called, to make a circle. A compass, exactly. Okay. Using a compass to make a circle. Vitakka is like the point of the compass that remains fixed in place, and vichara is like the hand of the compass that moves about in a circle with a pencil in order to draw the circle. Okay, similes and analogies should not be taken too literally. They all have their shortcomings. But anyway, they serve to illustrate that vitakka is, again to repeat, is the mental quality of fixing the mind on the object. And vichara is the quality of sustaining the mind on the object. Ensuring that the mind, the quality that, or the factor that ensures that the mind remains on the object. We say the factor that is continuing to observe the object as vitakka keeps the mind fixed on the object. So fixing and observing, that's vitakka and vichara. Okay, so in the stage of practice building up to the jhana, vitakka and vichara, those are the forerunners, the preliminary factors. Okay, as vitakka and vichara succeed in fixing the mind on the object and sustaining the mind on the object, then the five hindrances are thinned out, and even from sometimes when they just grow a little bit thin and just subside temporarily, it will come up a kind of luminosity of the mind, a brightness of the mind, as the mind becomes fixed on the object, concentrated on the object. And accompanying that concentration, it swells up naturally a kind of joy. This joy that swells up from the success of concentration, this is what is called piti. And then as this joy becomes stronger, then it turns into a state which is so overwhelming that even the word joy is no longer adequate. So we call it rapture. Except that it's not like a rapture not the kind of rapture that by which one gets carried away and loses self-control, but it's the delight that comes flooding into the mind and uplifts the mind and refreshes the mind. And along with this rapture, there comes a pleasant feeling, a feeling which is one of happiness. And this is what is called sukha. Okay, and so we have rapture and happiness often going together. These early stages, they go together. And it's this rapture which brings the delight to the mind, and then accompanying that delight is this pleasant feeling. The pleasant feeling is what is called sukha, or pleasure or happiness. Okay, and then as these four factors arise based on the attempt to focus on the object, then they will assist the act of focusing until the mind becomes completely unified on the object. And that is the fifth jhana factor, which is called one-pointedness of mind. Okay, so now we have these five factors. And these five factors are all working together in the act of observing the object. And as the five are directed to the object, then the concentration will go deeper and deeper until a certain point is reached where the mind crosses the threshold of normal, say, discursive consciousness and becomes completely absorbed in the object. In that first state of absorption in the object, that is called the first jhana. And so this is what is being described here. He enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thought and examination. And has rapture and happiness born of seclusion. This rapture and happiness arise because the mind has become secluded from the five hindrances and from the unwholesome states of mind. Okay, then the Buddha says now, after stating this definition of the first jhana, now he's relating this jhana attainment to the simile with which he begun. He started the discourse. He says, this Brahman is called a footprint of the Tathagata. That gives it special emphasis. It's something scraped by the Tathagata, just as the elephant, when it goes through the forest, it scrapes the branches of the tree. But a noble disciple does not yet come to the conclusion that the Buddha is perfectly enlightened, the Dhamma is well expounded, the Sangha is practicing the good way. Okay. The Buddha says this because the disciple is now practicing the way that the Buddha himself has taken. The Buddha, on his own quest for enlightenment, after he rejected the practice of asceticism and strict austerities, then he took up the practice of the jhanas. And the first stage that he reached was the first jhana. And so when the disciple is practicing and he reaches the first jhana, then he's seen a footprint of the Tathagata. But he can't yet say that the Buddha is perfectly enlightened, because the jhana itself is not a state of wisdom. It's not a state which gives an insight into the truth realized by the Buddha. And it's only when the disciple is able to see the truth that the Buddha himself has seen that he can come to the conclusion that the Buddha is really the enlightened one. Okay, maybe at this point I'll pause and then ask whether there are any quick questions. And then I'll have a question and answer period. We'll go for the lunch and then come back, and then we could have a half hour or so of continuing discussion. Okay, Kate?
Maybe this isn't work. I was just curious about the Pali word for dullness because it's a very thorough explanation.
Say it again.
I was curious about the Pali word for dullness. The Pali word for dullness because it had a very long English explanation, and I was getting a picture of like a willful immobility of mind.
Okay. The Pali word is tina, which suggests immobility is a very good word to describe it. It's or just dullness is also a good word to describe it. It suggests a state which is rigid, immobile, fixed. Certainly not. Did you use the word willful?
Yeah.
No, it's not willful. Usually it comes up contrary to one's will. One wants to be free from this dullness. But the mind just becomes sort of locked into it. And then one has to figure out ways to get at it, to break through it.
So the second part, if I may, is if a teacher, maybe you knew someone had brain damage, you might recommend this might be a certain diagnosis of their meditation. So if you had a student who you knew had brain damage, this would be sort of a condition. Instead of calling it brain damage, a meditation teacher might say they have a particular hindrance here, a condition of their life and dullness of the mind, or that's not a necessary extrapolation.
If there was, for a subtle state of brain damage, I think the manifestation would be more severe than what we ordinarily call dullness and drowsiness. Usually one recognizes dullness and drowsiness as such. It's just the difficulty is to overcome it. Any further questions?
I have a quick question.
Okay.
Would you characterize Vitakka and Vichara as intellectual activities or intellectual factors?
Okay, this is a good question. Would I characterize Vitakka and Vichara as intellectual factors? We have to understand that Vitakka and Vichara occur in many different contexts. So if one is engaging in intellectual activities, then Vitakka and Vichara would be prominent factors in those activities. But when one is practicing for the attainment of jhana, then one doesn't use Vitakka and Vichara in an intellectualizing mode. They then take on a somewhat different function than they would take when one is engaging in conceptualized, intellectualizing activities.
I will ask you later.
Okay. Okay, always ask a question.
When you use recipient of light or luminosity of the mind, are they more in the figurative sense or
In what sense?
figurative?
Figurative.
Figurative.
Or is a meditator, or does a meditator really see light? Is it, or if it's used in the figurative sense, is it enough to say that a meditator has lucid mind and that's enough? He doesn't have to see the physical light?
Okay. I think the intention here in this particular passage, when it speaks about abandoning dullness and drowsiness, he dwells free from dullness and drowsiness, recipient of light. Here, I don't think it's intended literally. It's not that one is seeing, the bright object, which is what they call the nimitta, but this is, I think, the kind of just a natural brightness comes into the mind, and so one becomes aware of this brightness coming into the mind. But as the concentration deepens on the object and becomes more focused on the object, then often for many meditators there will arise a kind of point of light, or circle of light, or ball of light, which is the nimitta, the special, that then becomes a special object of the deep concentration. But the way the phrase is used here, recipient of light, I don't think it's literally indicating a mentally visualized ball of light. Okay, you're on the question.
This is actually related to Bohui's question. In text, text characterizes the five hindrances as defilements of the mind. And you said that the defilements, the five hindrances obscure the luminosity of the mind. So, in my understanding, the condition of the mind, they're all just conditioned. So, is the text saying that we actually have the condition, the luminosity of the mind first? Or it's not in the temporal sense, but an inner layer of the mind is right, but the outer layer would be the five hindrances. So, as soon as we remove the five hindrances, we will reveal the luminosity of mind. So it actually exists already. We don't have to build the luminosity. Okay.
It's difficult to rephrase that for the microphone, but it's recorded. I'll just answer the question directly. Okay, the question is there a natural luminosity of the light?
Not natural, because everything is conditioned, right?
That is not explicitly stated in this particular passage. But there is another sutta that occurs in the Anguttara Nikaya, Pavasarabhidam Bhikkhave Chitta, that this mind, O monks, is bright or luminous, but it is obscured by agantuketi upakile, which means defilements that come from without. So here it's using a somewhat metaphoric language that the defilements as though the defilements come from outside the mind. Of course, the defilements come from within the mind, but the defilements are not considered necessary or intrinsic to the mind itself. But this luminosity is considered the intrinsic nature of the mind. So when the five hindrances are overcome, or even as they're overcoming, as they're being overcome, then this intrinsic luminosity of the mind becomes more and more prominent. Then when the five hindrances are completely overcome, then this luminosity of the mind appears in its own nature. So the mind becomes very bright and radiant. Maybe you should say that.
Just very quick, then is the luminosity of mind different from wisdom?
Yeah, the luminosity of the mind is not wisdom itself. It's just the quality of the mind. So it's the quality of the mind it becomes evident with increasing concentration, with increasing samadhi. Okay, we will stop here and then I'll come back after lunch and then we can have about a half an hour of discussion. I think the lunch is probably ready for everybody if they would like to go across and take lunch. Okay, so I lost my microphone. Okay, we end. As a sharing of the verse. It's not that I'm so hungry. Okay, we share the merits with the Devas, the Buddhas, and with all other beings. Akasata Chatumata Devanaga Kritika Manyantam Anumodita Chiram Rakantu Sastanam Akasata Chatumata Devanaga Kritika Manyantam Anumodita Chiram Rakantu Akasata Chagumata Devanaga Kritika Punyantam Anumodita Chiram Rakantu Param Eta Tachakam Hei Sampadam Punya Sampadam Sabhe Devanamrutantu Sabha Sampati Siddhya Eta Tachakam Hei Sampadam Punya Sampadam Sabhe Bhutanamaudantu Sabha Sampati Siddhya Eta Tachakam Hei Sampadam Punya Sampadam Sabhe Sattva Anumodita chi he the toe, he conjure sasakai upana, rupya rupisha, kasam vino, tu ka puchantu, pusam tu li puking.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.